You're watching SAGE, the Sex and Gender Education series from PFLAG of Jacksonville. On this episode, gender identity. A quick note before we begin. You'll hear me say this often, but it bears repeating. Language around sexuality and gender is fluid and can change from one group to another. A lot of factors influence the language people use to talk about themselves. This could include age, race, ethnicity, where people live or grew up, other identities and communities people belong to, like sexual orientation, ability, neurodiversity, and more. How I use language in this video may not be how everyone everywhere else uses this language. I do my best to be as general as possible so that the information we provide here is as useful to as many people as it can be. But if you hear someone talk about themselves in different ways than what you hear or see in this video, please remember that self-definition and self-identification are more important, and trust what people know about themselves, even if you don't totally understand it or it's different from what you're used to. I also will not be able to cover all the terms and ideas you may come across. Gender is a vast spectrum of identities, and the way people talk about it is constantly expanding. This will, I hope, lay a foundation that will increase your awareness of these things and give you the confidence you need to move forward. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's get to it. What is identity? Identity refers to our concept of ourselves in relation to the world around us. Our identities are influenced by the societies and cultures where we're raised, and this can include factors like spiritual or faith-based influences, cultural norms for different races and ethnicities, cultural norms based on geographic location, and any other communities we belong to as we grow and develop. We receive all these messages from the world around us about who we are and how we're supposed to be. Some of those messages feel right to us and they become part of who we are as people. Some of those messages feel wrong to us and we reject them. This process looks a little bit different for everyone. Our identities are deeply important. People deserve to be seen and loved for who they are, and many people work hard to find friends and communities where they'll be most accepted without having to hide parts of themselves away to avoid shame, stigma, or ridicule. Accepting someone and creating a safe space for them to share their identity with you is an important part of supporting and loving each other. This might mean learning more about who that person is, what they're interested in, how they spend their time, and how they live their lives. We all share these things about ourselves with the people we trust to some degree. The people we can share ourselves with the most completely are usually the people we feel closest to and safest around. All right, so what is gender? Gender is one of the concepts that we receive social messaging about. It's not the same as our biological and physiological sex. For more on differences between sex and gender, check out our video Beyond the Binary. Gender is entirely social and psychological. It's the word we use for the rules people make up about masculinity, femininity, and androgyny. Social norms about gender shift over time and from one culture to another. For example, here in the US, our founding fathers wore wigs, makeup, and high heels. In fact, it wasn't until the 19th century that American men decided cosmetics were effeminate. The term we use to describe social rules for men and women and other folks is gender. How many genders are there? In Western culture, we've historically made up these social rules based on people's biology, or more specifically, their genitals. People who have vaginas have been called women, and people who have penises have been called men. In other cultures, however, things aren't quite so simple. For example, many cultures embrace additional genders and complex ideas about gender diversity. In Siberia, the Chukchi people are a nomadic shamanic group that embrace a third gender. Third gender Chukchi people can hunt with Chukchi men, care for family with Chukchi women. In Benin, the Mino people, an all-female regiment of warriors who remain unmarried and childless. Meri is an indigenous term for third gender people in Nepal. Here in North America, many indigenous tribes embrace third gender individuals and two-spirit individuals that embody both masculinity and femininity. Thanks to advances in technology that allow us to travel, communicate, and befriend people from all over the world, cultures everywhere are becoming more diverse and complex, and social rules about gender are evolving in that process. All right, let's go over some terminology. There are more than 64 terms in the English language that apply to gender and gender diversity. Let's highlight just a few of the most commonly used terms. Many of these terms come directly from the PFLAG.org glossary of terms, and I encourage you to head over there and check out these terms and much more. Gender. Broadly, gender is a set of socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society considers appropriate. Gender spectrum. Gender spectrum is the concept that gender exists beyond a simple man-woman binary model and instead exists on a continuum. Some people fall towards the masculine or feminine aspects, and some people move fluidly along the spectrum, and some exist off the spectrum entirely. Gender identity. Gender identity is a person's deeply held core sense of self in relation to gender. Gender identity does not always correspond to biological sex. People become aware of their gender identity at many different stages of life, from as early as 18 months and into adulthood. According to Gender Spectrum, one study showed that the average age of self-realization for the child that they were transgender or non-binary was 7.9 years old, so around 7 or 8. But the average age when they disclosed their understanding of their new gender was 15 and a half years old. So kids know about their gender before they tell us. Gender identity is a separate concept from sexuality and gender expression. Please note, not everyone uses the term gender identity because it can sometimes imply that we make a choice about this rather than the truth, that it is an inherent part of who we are. Gender expression. Gender expression is the manner in which a person communicates about gender to others through external means such as clothing, appearance, or mannerisms. This communication may be conscious or subconscious and may or may not reflect their gender identity or sexual orientation. While most people's understandings of gender expressions relate to masculinity and femininity, there are countless combinations that may incorporate both masculine and feminine expressions, or neither, through androgynous expressions. An individual's gender expression does not automatically imply their gender identity. All people have gender expressions. Cisgender. Cisgender is a term used to refer to an individual whose gender identity aligns with the one associated with the sex they were assigned to at birth. The prefix cis comes from the Latin word for on the same side as. People who are both cisgender and heterosexual are sometimes referred to as cishet individuals. The term cisgender is not a slur. People who are not trans should avoid calling themselves normal and instead refer to themselves as cisgender or cis. Transgender, often shortened to trans from the Latin prefix for on a different side as. Transgender is a term describing a person's gender identity that does not necessarily match their assigned sex at birth. Transgender people may or may not decide to alter their bodies hormonally and/or surgically to match their gender identity. This word is also used as an umbrella term to describe groups of people who transcend conventional expectations of gender identity or expression. Such groups include, but are not limited to, people who identify as transsexual, genderqueer, gender variant, gender diverse, non-binary, gender expansive, and androgynous. Non-binary. Non-binary refers to people who do not subscribe to the gender binary. They may exist between or beyond the man-woman binary. Some use the term exclusively, while others may use it interchangeably with terms like genderqueer, gender fluid, gender nonconforming, gender diverse, or gender expansive. It can also be combined with other descriptors like non-binary woman or a trans-masc non-binary. Language is imperfect, so it's important to trust and respect the words that non-binary people use to describe their gender and experiences. Non-binary people may understand their identity as falling under the transgender umbrella and may thus be transgender as well. This is sometimes abbreviated as NB. Gender expansive. Gender expansive is an umbrella term sometimes used to describe people who expand notions of gender expression and identity beyond perceived or expected societal gender norms. Some gender expansive individuals identify as a mix of genders. Some identify more binarily as a man or a woman, and some don't identify with any gender at all. Gender expansive people may feel that they exist among genders, as on a spectrum, or beyond the notion of the man-woman binary. Sometimes gender expansive people use gender-neutral pronouns, but people can exist as any gender while using any pronouns. They may or may not be comfortable with their bodies as they are, regardless of how they express their gender. Agender. Agender refers to a person who does not identify with or experience any gender. Pronouns. Pronouns are the words used to refer to a person other than their name. Common pronouns are they, them, he, him, and she, her. For those who use pronouns, they are not preferred, they are essential. All right, how should I handle it if someone comes out to me? If you're new to thinking about this stuff, or if this stuff doesn't apply to you personally, it can seem really overwhelming or even unnecessary. It's important to keep in mind that everyone deserves the best language available to talk about themselves. We all deserve to be treated with respect and compassion. It's not important that you memorize every possible bit of language you might encounter. It's only important that we understand the diverse nature of gender and learn to be kind to each other. If someone comes out to you as trans or gender diverse, listen with an open mind and thank them for sharing that part of themselves with you. If they share language about their identity, you can ask what that means to them, or you can simply acknowledge what they've shared. Understanding ourselves is a journey, and people don't always know exactly how to talk about these things with others. So sometimes asking for more information can just put someone on the spot. Use your best judgment and work to create a space where the people you care about feel safe and respected. Often, coming out includes sharing information about a person's name and pronouns. Maybe they've changed their name to something that best fits their identity, and they're letting you know which pronouns are appropriate for you to use. Work hard to respect this. Calling a person by their old name or pronouns after you've been given new language to use can be hurtful, insulting, embarrassing, and invalidating. We'll create another video about pronoun use, but for now, if you have questions about how to use someone's pronouns, send us an email and we'll happily provide you with resources. That's all for this episode of Sage. Please check out the other videos and materials in our library for more information about these and other topics. If you have a question or topic you'd like to see us cover, or if you'd like to bring Sage education to a space near you, email sage@pflagjax.org and let us know. Thanks for watching.